you enjoying the absolute cluster that is the Cyberpunk 2077 launch? Because I sure am. What was once a highly anticipated release, regarded by many as perhaps the single silver lining of a god-awful year, has now become a skid mark on the underwear of the gaming industry. Cyberpunk 2077 was originally announced by means of YouTube teaser video way back in 2013, literally 3 whole years before actual development began, which is already a bad enough sign if you ask me. I know it's not all that unusual to announce games before coding actually begins, but this means development is taking a backseat to marketing and hype, and if that's the case, if that's your priority, well, no one can really be surprised by what ended up happening. And I really like the "it'll come out when it's ready" stinger at the end of the teaser. 1, because it aged terribly, and 2, because it was a not so subtle clue that they weren't really anywhere close to a finished product, which again begs the question, why are you rushing to market something you haven't even started creating yet? Before we dive into the whole thing, let's get something out of the way first. We already knew there was absolutely no way Cyberpunk could ever live up to gamers' lofty expectations. I don't know about you, but wild promises of untethered gameplay and endless customization and exploration options just trigger my No Man's Sky PTSD. I promised myself I wouldn't fall for that again, and unlike CD Projekt Red, I kept my promise. In the lead up to its release, Cyberpunk 2077 became one of the most anticipated games of the year, which is kind of weird in and of itself because video games are typically meant to be a distracting escapism from real life. But we already live in a world plagued by government corruption, greedy corporations, ubiquitous life-controlling technology, the annihilation of the very concept of privacy, and a near-complete sense of hopelessness. I can't be the only one finding it ironic that we're anxious to escape into a world that so closely resembles our own. But I guess we could all use some more neon. And we can argue all day on whether this kind of hysterical hype is the fault of the developers or gamers themselves, and since this is the internet, we won't come to an agreement. But nobody can deny that CD Projekt Red is the one that actually benefited the most from the almost religious zealotry behind Cyberpunk 2077, so that's the party I'm going to hold responsible. First of all, we have to talk about those unkept promises, and there's that No Man's Sky PTSD again.
Now this was okay in rehearsal, otherwise I wouldn't be here, but if anything horrible goes wrong, just keep in mind that I've not been here before.
Where was I? There is a long list of features that were announced at some point, only to be unceremoniously dropped in later stages of development. Voice customization, scalable walls, a working public transit system, the ability to buy property like in GTA 5, and I don't know, a working collision detection system probably too, because that was scrapped at some point apparently. And I see some people saying that it's the nature of the beast. Sometimes certain ideas don't get past the planning stages because their implementation breaks the game in some other way. But you know what? I don't buy that. How about you don't advertise stuff you haven't figured out yet, especially when announcing said features influences someone to buy your game? Is that an outrageous thing to ask for? Don't advertise stuff you haven't figured out yet. Like, I can't Photoshop abs on my Tinder pictures and when I show up to a date like my fat self, explain that, well, you know, implementing these features conflicting with the pizza-eating gameplay mechanics of my everyday life. I can't do that, can I? You can't go back on these promises and expect zero consequence. It's a betrayal of consumer trust as far as I'm concerned. And then there's the bugs. And yes, I get it. For such a complex, ambitious title, you have to expect some bugs. All the best games usually will ship with some glitches. It's just part of gaming. However, the problem is that these aren't trivial, difficult to reproduce, and barely noticeable bugs. We're talking game-breaking ups here. Cars spawning right under your own, police forces materializing out of thin air within closed areas, NPCs interacting with invisible objects, character models just randomly T-posing, you name it. If there's a way in which the world of the game could misbehave, there's probably a video of it happening on YouTube. In fact, videos highlighting the bugs in Cyberpunk 2077 may be, at least at the moment, the best way to experience the game. Definitely the funniest, and it's free. It isn't just hilarious because of how surreal some of these bugs are, but because they expose the fact that the game is fundamentally broken. It's hard to believe someone experienced these at the testing stages and thought, no, yep, that's good enough to ship. And you have to keep in mind, this is after several delays, which makes me wonder what the game even played like before. Like, did it make your PS4 explode? And perhaps the most egregious shenanigans of them all, CD Projekt Red actively hid the 8th gen versions of the game, the ones that run on PS4 and Xbox One, from the media. Considering the sizable install base of PS4 and Xbox One owners, it seems pretty obvious why they would do that. And it's not just a matter of lack of transparency here. I want to make this clear. CD Projekt Red didn't just lie by omission, they were actively dishonest. A few weeks ago, the CD Projekt Red CEO literally said the game runs surprisingly well on 8th gen consoles. And there's really only 3 scenarios that could explain him saying this. 1, he had zero clue about what was going on with the game, and if so, that's comically incompetent. 2, the CEO lied deliberately to prevent Cyberpunk sales on those consoles from being impacted, and if so, that is downright criminal. And 3, maybe it was a punctuation problem when they wrote the story. Maybe instead of saying Cyberpunk runs surprisingly well, what the CEO actually said was more like, oh, on PS4, it runs surprisingly well. These are all equally possible. And here's what really bothers me. Way too many people are giving CD Projekt Red a pass. Not the investors, of course. Stocks plummeted following this whole debacle, and there's even talks of a class action lawsuit. Even Best Buy and Sony were caught in the crossfire because they were forced to reconsider their return policies to accommodate the crowds demanding their money back. Some people, who I assume are very cool and always invited to all the parties, have even taken to shifting blame to gamers themselves for the audacity of believing the company when it said the game would run on a PS4 or an Xbox One. And that's perhaps the most cyberpunk possible, because we're talking about a multi-million-dollar corporation screwing over its own customers, and people are still blindly defending them. That's some Stockholm Syndrome shit. Some have also said that it's gamers' fault for pressuring the company to release the game, and I use the biggest air quotes possible, early. I don't know how putting a game out 7 years after the initial announcement, following several delays, would be early, but you do you. In any case, CD Projekt Red officially denied being pressured to release the game early, so there you go. They themselves are not buying the bullshit excuse you're giving on their behalf. And let me be honest here for a second. It's funny to dunk on this game, and to some of us with an aging graphics card and only a base model PS4, that's really the only way for me to take part in the collective experience, so to speak, that is a big launch like this. Making jokes, sharing memes, and generally just letting off some steam. This game was quite literally the only thing I looked forward to this year. So how could I not get a few jabs in? It's basically a coping mechanism at this point. And we know CD Projekt Red is going to slowly but surely fix the game. We know that. The first patch is already out, and the company has stated they will spare no expense fixing Cyberpunk, if for no other reason than the fact the company's reputation is at stake now. In 6 months, tops, you'll see a bunch of people saying Cyberpunk pulled a No Man's Sky and it's actually a great game now. But does that make it okay though? That's the takeaway message here. Should we let a company get away with such a disastrous launch and some really deceptive practices just because they cleaned up their own mess after the fact? If I spend the night at your house and piss on your carpet, you wouldn't think I'm a great guest because I cleaned it up 6 months after, right? Ultimately, the lesson here is don't pre-order anything ever again. Don't ever do it again. There's no reason to hand over money sight unseen when time and time again this industry proves to us that it's stupid to give them money ahead of time. If you didn't learn your lesson from Fallout 76, if you didn't learn your lesson from, I don't even know if No Man's Sky had a pre-order. Did it? I don't think it did. Don't pre-order games. Let this be the last time they pull this on us, okay? I'm counting on you, but let me know in the comments down below how you feel about the situation. If you're new to the channel, if you like what I do here, consider subscribing and dropping a like. It helps us out. Now I can actually say help us because my brother is working with me now as my director/producer, so it helps us out. Follow me on social media. I'm very active there, both Twitter and Instagram. The links for all are down below. And that's all the time I have for today. I'm Izzy and I'm done.